Okay, live streaming people, of which there are none yet. We're about to do part two. Boom. Okay. Getting this stuff posted on Mastodon and such, and then I'll get going. There we go. Get the media ready. Okay, we are back, and like I said, yeah, it's the next day for me. I didn't do it in the evening. I I did other things. I'm behind. Behind on the stuff I have to do this weekend, but that's okay. That's okay. Um, I'm about to play the recording Yvonne sent me to talk about his thoughts on tariffs. Just to place this in time for you, Yvonne recorded this after Trump added the 90-day pause on every country except China, but before he also announced that he was exempting consumer electronics like phones and computers and stuff. Um, Now, as I'm recording this, I just saw that on one of the morning shows, one of Trump's advisors, one of the Sunday morning shows, that is, one of Trump's advisors said, "Well, that's probably only temporary. We'll be bringing back tariffs on computers and electronics and semiconductors and all that kind of stuff. We just have to, you know, we're going to figure out a new form. They'll be back in like a month or so." That was Lutnick. Um, the quote was correct. That's right. Semiconductors and pharmaceuticals will have a tariff model in order to encourage them to reshore, in response to the host Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week saying, so you're saying that the big tariffs on things like smartphones and tariffs, all those iPhones built in China, that none of those tariffs that those tariffs are temporarily off, but they're going to be coming right back on in another form in a month or so. There you go. And you can tell my age because I almost said This Week with David Brinkley, but it has been a long time since David Brinkley hosted that show. Anyway, let's go to the Yvonne clip. I'm going to hit the button. See how this works. Here we go. I'm hoping that folks on the live stream will actually see the video, not just the audio. But of course, if you're listening to the audio version later, it's all audio anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Here you go.
Hello, Curmudgeons. Sorry I'm not on um, this week, but unfortunately had a death in the family, and this made it that I had to late cancel on Sam. But given the turmoil of this week, I did not want to leave you guys without. I think if any of you have followed on the Slack, you know that I have been very actively sharing what the hell is going on like right now. But let me give you the big highlights of this week. One of the first things is that Trump caved, and Trump caved because he was scared. They scared him, um, and the main reason why he caved on the tariffs after these rounds of Trump saying he's got all the cards, set all these tariffs, set them sky high. Stock markets kept just plummeting. Um, Even after he said that he's suspending the tariffs, there's something that's happening that's a very bad sign, which is that bond yields have soared, and they continue to soar, even with the expectation of a recession right now. That's a very bad sign. The two main reasons why this is probably happening is that number one, you had a lot of people that must have had margin calls, and the most liquid things that they can sell in a margin call, you have to sell what's unfortunately valuable. I unfortunately lived through one of these a long time ago, so when you get a margin call, it's usually because your dodgiest investments are the ones that really took the worst beating. So in order to cover for that, you have to sell the best stuff you've got. And so, in many cases, what that means to hedge funds is they got to sell treasuries. Um, so, so that's causing that to go up. But a lot of information really indicates that both Japan and China have been dumping bonds. And they're doing this in retaliation. I have no doubt that they're doing this in retaliation. Trump kept going out there talking about how he's holding all the cards, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. It's complete horse shit. As the U.S. imports goods, we pay in dollars. They in turn buy a lot of treasuries, um, and that money flow has happened like that for decades. And the reason why a lot of people want to do that also is because the U.S. is a good place has been historically a good place to invest money, has been a safe haven to invest money. People want money in the United States because they expect stable government. They expect stable monetary policies. They don't expect arbitrary changes. And unfortunately, Trump has come in and broken that. He has severely broken the faith that people have in the U.S. dollar and U.S. Treasury bonds. And so that's why you're seeing a situation that I don't remember ever seeing in my lifetime, which is as stocks are getting dumped, you're not seeing the race to safety as going to treasuries. They're going somewhere else. The money's going somewhere else. One thing that has taken a lot of that money is gold. I think I probably mentioned, I know on the Slack I mentioned this, but in February, I did sell a substantial part of my holdings in the stock market and bought gold. Precisely because I feared something like this. And also because another guy that's smarter than all of us, as times have become more obvious, was hoarding cash and had sold a lot of his stocks. And that's Warren Buffett. And that guy doesn't take such a decision lightly. He was reading the room better than any of us. And he saw that a lot of this was very possible. And so Berkshire Hathaway is holding around 400 billion in cash and equivalents. And he's the only guy that's up in the year. Everybody else, top 10 richest people, are down. They're down a lot. Um, we are in a uncharted territory situation here right now, where the tariffs, not all the tariffs are going. Many of them are still in place. You've got a lot of small businesses that are trying to clear merchandise at customs now from China, and they can't afford to. The tariffs are so steep that you're having people not being able to afford the shit they ordered months ago. So this is a difficult situation for many, and nobody is coming to the rescue of these small businesses right now. And when a lot of this merchandise will get through, if it gets through, it's going to push up inflation. There's no way around it. So we are right now in a situation that is I've never lived through my lifetime where I saw just somebody purposely trashing a good economy. And that's what Donald Trump just did. And the pain of this is not all here yet, not even remotely. We're going to get a lot more pain as the months progress. Even if some deal is cut, like right now, he didn't suspend all the tariffs. Not all of them are gone. He said that he's going to negotiate 70 countries in like 90 days. That is an insane amount of deals to cut in 90 days. Most of the trade deals that were in place that we had up to now were a byproduct of years and years and years of negotiation. And so all of a sudden trying to cut 70 deals in like 90 days seems completely nuts. Look, every indicator right now for the economy is bad. There are no good indicators. Consumer sentiment, interest rates, they're not looking good. Trump's approval ratings in tandem are collapsing like right now. Congress hasn't done anything. I'm wondering when the breaking point is going to be. I think at some point, if this continues, there will be a breaking point. Because one of the things, people are talking about authoritarians and how they handle things. Look, the two best examples I can give, Putin and Hitler, one of the things they did was like prop up the economy as they took control. That was key. I mean, Putin went and in his first decade really improved the Russian economy. So did Hitler coming out of World War II. That's how you make sure that your supporters are on board. But Trump instead went in like inside 90 days, not even 90 days. Kneecap the economy. We just kneecap the economy for no good fucking reason whatsoever. And that pain, the worst of the pain, is going to hit his supporters. Already, his supporters on the Wall Street, all of them, most of them realize that he is a complete idiot that cannot be trusted. That's a fact. Whether they're saying it out loud, that's a different thing. But most of them have come to that conclusion. And as the pain of this self-inflicted wound starts reaching everybody, this will cause a lot of people to get really angry. A lot of his supporters to get really angry. That's when we see whether this starts having a significant effect on whether Congress acts to basically take control of the situation at some point. I mean, it's just one of those things where right now you got a Congress that is just acquiescing at every turn to the lunacy of this administration. And they're pushing this economy to the breaking point. I mean, forget about all the other things that they're doing in terms of, I mean, I'm not even going to discuss that, which they keep doing, all these things that are wrecking every other institution, undermining science, undermining our bilateral security agreements, undermining the health of the average American. Just so many things. But it's going to be, this is bad. This is bad, and just rolling back, there was a relief rally this week to some extent about him pushing back some stuff that hasn't translated into the bond market. And I think that is the key benchmark. I think American companies, to some extent, the global ones, because they sell so much outside the U.S. I mean, in the case of Apple, for example, more than 60% of revenue comes outside of the U.S. They probably aren't taking the total brunt of some of this stuff. And the dollar devaluing in terms of like, hey, if you sell in Europe, well, that increases the value of what you sell overseas. So that's beneficial in certain ways for the profit and loss of companies. Now, the other thing is the Chinese are really, really pissed, and they've decided that they're unlike before, where you know they were allowing Trump to be a bully. I think that one thing that's broken this cycle, like right now, is the fact that they stood up and said "fuck you" no. And I had hoped that other people had been taking a harder stance against him for these things. But we'll see what happens. Um, They said they're going to negotiate. I don't know when that's going to happen, but hopefully we'll talk to you guys soon next week. Okay. All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
Okay. So there was Yvonne on the tariffs. You know, this is his expertise more than it is mine. But I'll add a couple thoughts anyway before we break and move on to something else. Um, First of all, this I think absolutely is an indication of a true Trump back off, and we have seen. This is not the first one. There have been a number of situations where when something has gotten a significant amount of negative pushback, Trump has actually backed off, or his administration has backed off. Um, there were more minor examples, like even things like, hey, the bathrooms closed at national parks and stuff. They figured out a way to back that out. There were some other policy changes that people were like, this is really stupid, this is dumb, and things that were getting universal mocking, not the things that your usual suspect Democrats would complain about, because they want that, they love that, they're all the better, all the better if the all of the blue politicians are upset and Democrats are freaking out. But the things that were causing everybody to go, wait, what are you doing? They have backed off on a number of those things. Before this, most of them have been smaller items, though. They have been things that uh you had to be you might notice if you paid attention to that particular thing, but they weren't big headline grabbing backoffs. They were sort of little incremental things. This is, I think, the first one that's really big. And you know up until like the day before uh Trump backed off a bit on this, he was saying, no, we're not backing off, this is what we want. And there was back and forth with various people of his spokespeople not quite being coherent on their messaging, but some saying that there was going to be negotiations, some saying there were not, and this is just how it is. Um, we're clearly now on the we're making negotiations. But here's the thing, too. Yvonne and I had said last week that, look, yeah, we talked a bit about the worst case scenarios if this just like stuck. But we said the most likely scenario was Trump would claim some sort of minor concession as a huge win and use it to declare victory and back off. Here's the thing. There wasn't even that fig leaf this time. The closest it came, what he said was he was keeping the tariffs on for countries that had retaliated, specifically China. I noticed there was some EU retaliation too that apparently got ignored, but we're keeping the tariffs on for the countries that retaliated, and for everybody else, we're backing off. Now, they didn't back off completely. They kept like the 10% minimums across the board everywhere. They kept like previous tariff increases. This was just like on some of the new quote unquote reciprocal. We talked last week how it's not really a reciprocal tariff, but uh, there was no win to claim. It was a straight up back off. It was a we're not gonna do this. We're gonna push another 90 days, and this matches what he did earlier with Canada, Mexico, etc. Remember, before those things, he the deadline has been announced a couple times, and then they moved it at the last minute, and then they moved it in the last minute. Some of them are in effect now, to be clear, I think, but they and this time it was sort of allowed to go into effect and then pulled back, but it was such a short time, it was unclear how many people actually paid things by the time they backed off again. But this was a straight off back off. And the other thing that I think is important, there's been reports like the biggest guy pushing for this tariff approach within the administration was Navarro. And it appears his role has been diminished. The drama inside the Trump administration was significant here. We have sort of the rift with Musk over this. Like Musk clearly did not want the tariffs, and he was vocal about it, and was talking about how stupid Navarro was, and how he hoped President Trump would reconsider and all this kind of stuff. But that was not the only one. This was something that clearly was producing divisions within the administration between the people who were like, trust Trump, which was the official line, versus people who were like, I'm not so sure about this. And then we have this further back off on electronics, and then the reversal of that from the Sunday morning shows that I mentioned right before playing the Yvonne clip, that those might be back, which leads to Yvonne's comment about, look, we had a relief rally when some of these things were backed off, but then things started going down again in the markets. And as he said, the bond markets have still been acting weird. Because completely aside from the specific tariff policies that are being put on, taken off, put on, taken off, adjusted, the point is the unpredictability and the lack of a coherent plan that anyone can discern. Like I've listened to a bunch of people, financial expert type folks being interviewed about this. And as far as I can tell, even on the otherwise Trump supporting side of things, nobody can articulate a coherent, workable plan for what they're really trying to accomplish and how it will be accomplished and what kind of time frames it will be accomplished in, and how how this would all work. I mean, as Yvonne and I mentioned before, like, okay, look, they keep talking about reshoring various manufacturing. Now, there's some problematic things about how even if you do that, you're potentially replacing, high skill, high paid jobs with lower skill, low paid jobs, which is that what you really want to do? But like, assuming you want to do that, there's still the question of like, okay, to really, if we're going to build up American manufacturing capabilities again and try to bring them back to how they were 50 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever the goal is, the tariffs aren't enough, especially erratic tariffs like this, because at the bare minimum, you have to convince companies to undergo this long-term investment to turn that ship around and say, okay, I guess the international investments aren't coming back. We're going to have to do something. Maybe there's an opportunity here. But we're talking years and years of investments to build factories and set that up and get that moving and figure out what's going on. And, huge dollar amounts associated with that too. So certainly no one's going to do it if they don't believe that what's going on is going to last more than a few days before it changes again. It has to be not it has to be stable on the time frame of years, maybe decades, like for them to really and truly believe it. Or there has to be substantial governmental guidance and funding and all this other stuff to sort of kickstart it. And there's absolutely no interest from the Trump administration on doing that kind of stuff. And they're dismantling the things along those lines that were already in place under the previous administrations. So how instead you're just threatening the price increases and that's it, and you're not even threatening that consistently, because of all of the back and forth, and there'll be a delay, and then we'll figure this out, and then it'll be back, and then and nobody knows what to believe other than this is uncertain and this is bad. And so, yeah, we're still market's still way down from where it was. Consumer sentiment is plummeting. Expectation of inflation is rising rapidly. Um, Yvonne had mentioned that within a few weeks, we should actually start seeing the inflation in our day-to-day lives when we go to the store. Um, the back off this week may delay how obvious that is or when that is to some degree. And maybe he ends up delaying it indefinitely. And so he freaked out the Wall Street people, but mainstream isn't mainstream. Main Street's not going to see the effects right away. Maybe. But these things have a tendency to get out of control. And so we'll see. Um, Tariffs are still up from where they were. They're just not catastrophically up now that he's backed off. And even with China, even with China, with the additional back off of consumer electronics, this will be less impactful. I'm not going to say not impactful. Like there's a lot of things that China puts out there that are not consumer electronics. And there was actually a good table. I shared it on our Curmudgeon's Corner Slack. Um, but let's see if I can get you guys a reference to it. Da, 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 da. Okay, this was from the New York Times. Published on April 12th, or updated on April 12th anyway. How much are tariffs on Chinese goods? It's trickier than you think. Because everybody keeps talking about a top line number, with it's going to be 145% tariffs or whatever on China. But in fact, it's I mean, first he said 125, then 145, then it all because people were trying to figure out how to add up the previous tariffs and the new tariffs and whatever. Anyway, but it's actually more complicated because it's different depending on which goods you're talking about, and their components of it. This New York Times article breaks it down. Look, there's a standard base rate. Apparently, there's a 3.4% average. Again, depending on the type of good. So there's a base rate. that was already in place worldwide before Donald Trump's second term. There were some pre-2025 term tariffs, some of which were introduced by Trump and kept on by Biden. Some were even increased by Biden, that vary based on product, country, etc. And then even within Trump's term so far, there's different sets of tariffs. He's done tariffs on steel, tariffs on aluminum, tariffs on car parts. Then we had the fentanyl tariffs, and then finally the reciprocal tariffs. And they're all different, and they're all different by country, and they're all different by type of goods. So specifically on China, this article points out the range. Apparently, the highest tariffs out there are on syringes and needles from China. And the total of all of those things is a 245% tariff on syringes and needles from China, apparently. Going down some of the list, lithium ion batteries, 173%. Squid, 170%. Wool sweaters, 169. Plastic dishes, 159. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. And it goes down the bottom few. Metal furniture, 70%. Door hinges for cars, 67%. Laptops, only 20%. And apparently children's books, 0%. Apparently, and I did not know this, but like most children's books sold in the United States are imports from China. Who knew? I guess if you're in the children's books industry, you probably knew, or if you have a child and have taken the time to read the front of the book where it gives you all that information, maybe you do. I didn't know. But apparently there's an exemption for educational materials, and children's books falls in that category, and 0% on those. But here's the thing. Like electronics, I was worried. I am hanging on to a really old iPhone 12 Pro Max. I've mentioned this on the show before. The last couple of cycles, is the new phone that's out there significantly nicer than my current phone? Yes. Is it old enough to upgrade? Absolutely. They're on the 16s now. This is a 12. That's 4 cycles old. I used to update every 2 or 3. Originally, it was every other. I got every other. Then I sort of expanded to 3, and then this one stretched to 4. Now it's getting up to, if I wait till the 17, it'll be 5 years. Because I keep telling myself, well, it's working. It's doing everything I need it to. I don't really have a justification to replace it, like unless it breaks. But I was still thinking 5 years is a long time. When the 17s come around, I'll get a new one. Because it is feeling a little slow now, a little sluggish. There's some like I've been like Minecraft over the last couple weeks has had a special event associated with the movie, and so Alex has been asking me to play along with him, and I have been, and I've noticed I've been like it's been a little sluggish. The latest versions of Minecraft on this thing compared to how he has it on so I'm like, okay, maybe 7, and I was thinking like, have I made a mistake in waiting for the 17s? Because if the full weight and force of all these Chinese tariffs come on, am I going to be talking double the price for an iPhone? Maybe I should rush out and get a 16 now before that happens. And then, they've been exempted. Well, I mean, it's still going to, apparently, things like smartphones are still on the hook for a 20% tariff from the fentanyl stuff, but not the others anymore, at least until maybe they bring them back in a month from now. So I'm like, okay, I don't have to rush out and get that 16. I can stick to my plan, replace it when it breaks and or when the 17s come out. But there's lots of other stuff too. We get lots of stuff from China. I don't know if you folks have noticed, we get lots of stuff from China. Uh, I once remember people pointing out, and maybe I'm sure it was slightly exaggerated, but they basically said, "Look, everything Walmart sells is from China. That's the secret to their pricing." you know, their you know, so this is gonna still affect people, but maybe less than it was, and maybe there'll be more backing off. I think the key is, Yvonne mentioned what's the breaking point, and I think the important part to remember here is I think Trump himself breaks and backs off before things get to the point where anyone else would break against him. We were sort of talking in the context of like, okay, when will Congress have had enough? And we get enough Republican senators and representatives, including the leadership in both of those bodies, for them to actually overtly go against Donald Trump and do something like restrict his powers on tariffs or something. The answer is it would be it would have to be so incredibly disastrously bad that they felt there absolutely was no other choice. And they were not just ditching Donald Trump over this one issue, they were ditching him over everything. In that kind of scenario, maybe we are also talking like, Vance in the cabinet trying to do the 25th or something. But in that scenario, or impeachment into Congress with Republicans on board. But like, honestly, I can't really imagine those scenarios. Congress has been like the congressional Republicans gave up a long time ago. They made their deal. And then we've had more elections where more very virulently, more intensely MAGA politicians have been elected over the last 8 years. So that's going to be hard. The cabinet was chosen completely based on loyalty. Uh, and so, yeah, no. But what I think would happen is if you even started seeing things tilting in that direction, Donald Trump himself backs off. And that's exactly what happened this last week. You had a number of congressional Republicans signing on and saying, yes, they would support legislation restricting presidential power around tariffs. It wasn't enough yet to actually move anything, but it was non-zero. There were a handful, and they were speaking out about it. And there were even more that were publicly expressing their uncertainty about what was going on. And then you had the bond stuff that that Yvonne mentioned. And you had more and more indications that all of the economic indicators were going bad fast. I heard someone say Donald Trump is okay with a recession. He thinks maybe a recession is okay and that we can do that and he can move on beyond that, and that maybe it's even necessary to accomplish his goals, but that he's not okay with the depression. And of course, it's a fuzzy boundary between the terms, but basically, there's a difference between, hey, we're going to have some economic times that are a little bit rougher than we would like for a couple quarters, and then we're going to bounce back, versus you send the entire country into an economic spiral where there's mass destruction and it lasts years. And so Donald got scared. Donald backed off. Apparently, he's, you know, wasn't done backing off because a few days later there was the electronics thing. And I just saw a note too that, the headline was the electronics, but apparently there's more to it than that, and there's maybe some additional back off in other areas too. Um, yeah, and maybe maybe he wasn't expecting all of these effects. He made some comments about, I forget the word he used. It was a funny, unusual word about how people were getting queasy about things and how people were reacting to this, and so he had to back off a little bit. He actually admitted that he had to back off because people were reacting to it in a bad way. And I think that's important. I mean, it does indicate that there is still some degree of, okay, Donald Trump will react to the public and the markets thinking that what he's doing is bad. And that's why you had that sort of relief rally when that was first announced. It's good that there is that reaction. It's better than a president who will continue on no matter what as the country descends into chaos. Um, but only a little better. Because we still know he's erratic. We still know that all of this, you can't, there is no certainty. The things that are missing here are A, no sense that this is actually part of a coherent plan that would work, and two, no sense that there'll be any stability, that it won't be something completely different in 5 minutes or a week or a month. So you can't plan on anything because it always seems like, and like, you know, the markets were apparently finally learning this lesson this last week or two, but this has been the case in all of the other policy areas since inauguration day. I mean, hell, last term too. This isn't all brand new. It seems to be intensified this time, but everything just seems to be, what's Donald Trump feel like doing today? What are his whims? In his last administration, we had the adults in the room trying to slow things down. This time, we really don't. Donald Trump wakes up in the morning, decides he's going to do something crazy, and there's executive orders on the table that afternoon around the crazy thing. And then it happens, and then there's reaction to it. And then if the reaction is bad, maybe he drops, maybe he backs off, maybe he changes it, maybe he adjusts it, maybe he doesn't. But it all depends on what he feels like that moment. And as usual, who's the last people that were talking in his ear? Very chaotic, very unpredictable, which results in typically very negative results in the end. And frankly, it's like, you know, for the most part, I think the things that Donald Trump wants to do are bad anyway. But frankly, even if we had in place somebody who I agreed with on everything policy wise, this kind of chaos would still be negative. Add to it that everything he wants practically is bad to begin with, and it makes it so much worse. But anyway, I think that's enough on that. I'm going to take another break. Break, 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 break. And then when we come back, I will talk about something else. I think, that's my list. I mean, I'm going to leave it open a little bit because, something new may come up while I'm taking this break, since I'm going to go off and do other things. I'm going down. I'm traveling to Olympia to visit my wife for lunch and to sign some papers we need to sign on something. Um, and so I'll be gone quite a few hours before the next version of this. So who knows? There could be like big breaking news to talk about that does everything. But my gut right now is that what I will want to talk about is the court case with that guy who was mistakenly sent to El Salvador. The Supreme Court ruled on that. The administration is still hemming and hawing about trying to get him back. And that leads more generally into conversations about Trump versus the courts and all of this kind of stuff. And it leads into the conversation about sort of people being disappeared in general. So that's probably going to be my next topic. Absent major breaking news or something else just coming up that's not major, but I decide I want to talk about it. But you will know in minutes. I won't know for hours, at least. Anyway, here's another breaky break thing. Break, goo, blah, 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 break.
AlexandZilla.com by Alex and Dad. Gaming videos and more from Alex. Elementary school by day, YouTube by night. AlexandZilla.com. Alexandzilla is ALEXMXELA, and .com is period and then COM.
Okay, for anybody watching the live stream, I'm gonna pause it now. I mean, no one's watching live again, but hey, maybe somebody's watching a replay. But I'm gonna hit stop, and we will pick up again. I don't know, a few hours. Bye.